Welcome to Chasing That Neon Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Pope. Join me on each episode as I interview session players, songwriters, sidemen, and women, people with great stories about the music and musicians that so many of us still love. All right, let's get to it. Today's guest is one of my favorite guys in Nashville. He's an accomplished songwriter who has co-written #1 country songs, Two Pina Coladas for Garth Brooks, How Long Gone You Gonna Be for Brooks and Dunn, River of Love for King George Strait, and Josh Turner's one of my favorites, Would You Go With Me? Also, he wrote Don't Go Lovin' On Nobody But Me for Blake Shelton. Along with being a hit songwriter, he's a very talented multi-instrumentalist who's played as a touring and recording musician with so many artists, Jerry Reed, Trisha Yearwood, Alan Jackson, Osborne Brothers, Guy Clark, John Prine. Do you hear that list? That's insane. Shawn is also a great producer. He co-produced and won a Grammy for Folk Album of the Year back in 2013. It was for Guy Clark's My Favorite Picture of You record. Also, recently, he produced American Idol finalist Lauren Massetti's debut album called God Made Woman. If you haven't heard that record, you're missing out. It's fantastic. We're going to be talking about a bunch of this stuff. But before we get into it, I want to mention Shawn's band is so hot. I'm telling you, you're going to hear me gush in this interview when we get to talking about it because they just play my favorite kind of country music. In his band, I'm going to shout these guys out. You have Mike Bubb on bass, Larry Adaminu on drums. I've seen Jimmy Stewart on dobro, Pete Wassner on keys, and Guthrie Trapp picking the fire out of that electric guitar. All these guys are world-class musicians and very accomplished. It would take me forever to go through their resumes. And when they join the stage with Shawn Camp, who's singing, playing guitar, and even fiddle sometimes, then Lauren Massetti comes up and sings with them, Lord, you ain't going to find a stage with that much talent on it anywhere in the world. And this is usually happening on a Monday night or a Thursday night at a couple different bars in town here in Nashville. 3rd and Lindsley, Station Inn, down at the Gulch. This is why I love Music City. Shawn's also a member of one of my favorite bluegrass bands, Earls of Leicester, where he's the lead singer. They pay tribute to the music of Flatt and Scruggs. It's an all-acoustic band, and it consists of legendary bluegrass musicians Jerry Douglas, Jeff White, Daniel Kimbrough, Charlie Cushman, and Johnny Warren. And if that ain't enough, Shawn's also been a member of the world-famous Headliners, an all-star band made up of Camp and veteran writers Big Al Anderson and Pat McLaughlin, along with Michael Rhodes and Greg Morrow. He is way too humble to tell y'all all this stuff, but I wanted to set the table for this conversation. I sure hope you enjoy it. Here's Shawn Camp. Hey man, I'm doing good. Thank you for doing this.
Oh man, I'm glad to be doing it with you.
So, what year did you move to Nashville?
Well, I moved to Nashville January the 13th of 1987, and I had been playing in bluegrass bands over in Arkansas and Oklahoma, and old VFWs and little country bands and American Legion halls and stuff, but at the time I was playing with a guy named Freddie Sanders and Signal Mountain Bluegrass Band out of McAlester, Oklahoma, and he ran a big festival in McAlester, a big bluegrass festival, and he had hired the Osborne Brothers to come play his show there,
Yeah.
And their fiddle player Blaine Sprouse was going to law school, and he was about to quit the band. So they were kind of looking for a replacement for Blaine. And my dad is a retired iron worker, and at the time, he would boom out to different states. All my childhood, we would live all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Daddy just happened to get a job in Nashville in the winter, in January of '87 for about a month. He had a job over here.
Oh wow!
So me and Mom and Daddy, all three, came over here in January, and I started with the Osborne Brothers a month later on the Grand Ole Opry was my first show with them playing fiddle for them.
Oh, my goodness.
That's how I really got going over here,
Wow. So that sounds like you took a page out of Marty Stewart's story there.
Well, I was 20 years old, and
yeah.
My folks stayed over here for a month, and so we kind of set up house in a little apartment, and then they left and went back to Arkansas. And we always kept a home in Arkansas,
Right.
So so they left me here to fend for myself after that, and I lasted about 6 months with them, and then I went to work with several different other bands, little house gigs and honky tonks around Nashville, just setting in, and I worked with I don't know, a lot of different folks, but
I saw caught my interest. I saw. Did you happen to play with Jerry Reed for a while?
I did. I actually I was actually hired to play with Tom T. Hall, playing fiddle with Tom T. Hall. He didn't have a lot of dates at the time. Jerry Reed didn't have a lot of dates.
Yeah.
And so I thought for a little while that I could work for both of those guys, for this stretch of time, because, at the time I was starving to death. I would take a day job, a temporary service job, or whatever in between music jobs, and just to try to pay the bills. So I think Tom T. Hall got wind that I was also working for Jerry Reed, and he fired me before I ever played with him.
No.
I didn't even see him during that. He hired me for like 2 weeks, and I rehearsed with his fiddle player. And so then I'm working with Jerry Reed, and I worked with him for just a couple of months, and Alan Jackson started calling me to play with him, and
oh my gosh.
And so I had all that going on at the same year, and I ended up going with Alan Jackson. I should have stayed with Jerry Reed, though. I'll just tell you the truth, because Jerry Reed, I was learning so much, man. That guy was a musician's musician for sure, and
oh yeah,
he was just the greatest. And I only worked with him briefly, but what a great experience.
I've got a buddy. You might know him, is Rick McClure, drummer.
I sure do, yeah.
And he talks about a tour he went on and played for Jerry with. It was Jerry and Bill Monroe together on a tour.
Wow.
And they would take turns closing out the show. One would open for the other, just take turns each night.
That's great.
And at the end, they both came out and did a song together. And I honestly can't even imagine this. To be honest with you, I can't even imagine those two on stage together.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
But that must have been maybe a dream of Jerry Reed's, or it wouldn't have happened. Because I'm sure that Jerry Reed loved listening to Bill Monroe on the Grand Ole Opry as a kid.
Right.
Coming up when he did. And,
yeah. Well, I don't think it was Bill Monroe's dream, probably, but
probably not.
But I know, they did. Rick told me, he said, you could tell that Bill got it with Jerry. Like, he had so much respect for Jerry Reed's musicianship, like you said, just the level of musician he was, and the way he paid respect to Big Mun up there, and it was just a sight to see, according to Rick. And I just think, man, that would have been a great documentary right there, to send some cameras on that one.
Well, let me tell you my little story about Bill while we're here.
And
Bill Monroe was in the process of changing band members. He was about to lose his fiddle player and his guitar player, the lead singer. So actually, I went over there. Right after the Osborne Brothers show or job I had, Bill Monroe was going to be hiring a fiddler and a lead singer, and so I go to Bill's house to audition. I called him up, and I said, I hear you're going to be hiring a fiddler and a guitar man. Yes, sir, that's exactly right. And I said, well, I'd sure love to try out for you if I could. Why don't you just come on out here to the house then,
Yeah.
So I go out there, and I go to Bill's house, and I'm, nervous wreck, just in awe of Bill Monroe. I grew up listening to his records. My granddaddy's favorite artist was Bill Monroe. And so from little on, Bill Monroe was a god to me, And
right.
so we go into his house. He had like this old log cabin that, it was really old. It felt like it was a 200-year-old cabin. And it was just me and Bill Monroe.
Oh, my gosh.
And I've wished a million times that I'd have had a recorder going, because I played a couple of fiddle tunes with him, and he said, "Get your guitar." And so I get my guitar out, and I sing. He said, "What would you like to sing?" And I said, "How about the Old Crossroads?" And we did the Old Crossroads. And my hair was standing up. Just me and him did a duet with Bill and his mandolin and me and my guitar.
Good
and,
Lord.
And we got done with that. And he said, "That's fine. That's fine. Now, what do you want to do now?" And I said, "How about the Florida Sunshine?" And he said, "Oh, that's a powerful number right there." So we got into that. We sang that. And all these time, I had friends that had been Bill's bluegrass boys in the past, and he was notorious for working his bluegrass boys to death on that farm.
Yeah.
And so I got ready to pack up, and I had a little red Mazda pickup, with a camper on it, and he walked out and helped me back this truck up. And he said, "You can just back that up there, right here, turn it around." He said, "That's a fine looking wagon you've got there, boy." And I said, "Thank you, sir, thank you." And he kind of leaned down in the window, and over his shoulder was this old rickety fence line that just looked awful back behind him,
Yeah.
And he said, "Now a man needs to know what he wants to do." And I said, "That's right." And somehow or another, I just said, "Well, I enjoyed it. Take care." And I left. And in hindsight, I know that he was asking me what I wanted to do, if I wanted to play a guitar or fiddle. But I started thinking at that moment about getting out there in the heat of the Tennessee sun, man, and working on that fence line with Bill Monroe at 20 years old.
Yeah.
I just did not want to go to work on that fence line, So.
Well, I was waiting for you to say he finally looked at you and said, "Now, how do them post hole diggers fit your hands, boy?"
Yeah. What I should have said was, "I just want to be a bluegrass boy, Mr. Monroe," and I would have been in there, but I didn't.
Oh man! Well, I tell you what, that experience is just unbelievable. Wow, what could have been there?
I know it, man. He would have been hard. He was hard on all of his fiddlers, but I would have learned a lot. He knew it, man. He wrote it for one thing.
Well, yeah. Absolutely. Well, you do a pretty good Bill. I've never heard you do Bill, but you do a great Lester, obviously. But your Bill is spot on too. No, that's pretty good, man.
Oh man, thank you. I don't know. I just loved him. That's the thing. I guess I loved all those guys. All of the great ones in my mind. They were very identifiable, and individuals. Right. And so Monroe for sure.
Yeah.
Was powerful guy.
So you came here and you're playing. You're playing with all these different guys in these different groups and auditioning. And at what point did you start thinking, about being an artist, and how did that transition happen?
Well, I just, I think writing songs is really what opened that pathway for me, because at that time my voice had just changed. When I first moved to Nashville, I wasn't much of a singer. Not that I am now, but I really didn't. After my voice started changing, I didn't sing for years. I just played fiddle and guitar and mandolin and stuff, And
yeah.
So when I started writing songs, I had to sing them, so that it just kind of morphed into me doing my own songs, you know.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, I tell you, the first time I ever saw you, it was probably over a decade ago at Bluebird, and I had been I'd been going and seeing songwriter rounds and stuff, but my thing was I loved the '90s country sound, but I loved Elvis and Johnny Cash and all them guys. Like that's really what I
Yeah.
grew up. I kind of grew up around my grandparents a lot, and just really going through their records. And so when I came to town, it was just nothing like that on the radio or
Right.
nothing. And I go down. Somebody suggested I go see you. I went down, and there's a band up there. I'm like, okay, cool. At Bluebird, there's a band. All right. I wasn't aware that that happened right there on that little stage.
Yeah.
And and man, y'all took off into Hot Wired.
Oh.
And I thought, I just remember sitting there going, I feel like Elvis just walked out and started CC Rider, and yet at the same time, I feel like it's Johnny Cash and Folsom singing Folsom, like the opening number. I just felt like it was all of that at once
Oh
with
man.
a little bluegrass, but yet you had this honky tonk sound as like a Telecaster. I think that's what it was at the time, just rocking along with you. That got
Yeah.
that '90s sound. I mean, everything about it. I was like, that dude. I don't. That dude is an artist. Like that was, and I knew you were a writer, and all that. But when I saw that, I just knew. So you're talking about your voice or much of a singer, or whatever. Man, all I can tell you is that presence and that band and that energy in your show. You're a showman, man. So I can
Oh.
I'll argue with you a little bit on your voice there, but
Thank you, Adam. I
so
appreciate that, man.
so you go back now. Now I showed up. I mean, it's the late 2000s at this point, but if you go back to the early '90s, now you're starting to write more. You said. Now what if you don't mind, what kind of got you? Were you already writing songs on your own, or did you come here and just kind of end up just that was the culture of the town and you just jumped in?
Well, it kind of was. I had written little snippets of songs, but I never finished them really since the time I was just an early teenager, and but I would never let anybody hear them or anything. But for some reason, um, the first co-write I ever did in Nashville was at Mel Tillis's publishing company, and it was the old Pete Drake studio building.
Oh wow.
Mel was, and it was with a guy named Dennis Adkins, who was just a super guy. We ended up being friends, and he said, "Why don't you come by and write a song with me?" And at the time, I never even considered myself a songwriter, but I went over there and we wrote a song, which I kind of had a good part of it started, but I didn't realize it,
Yeah.
He helped me flesh it out. And we went up to the attic, and this guy named Matt Lindsay was working for Mel Tillis, who he ran this reel-to-reel tape recorder and recorded our work tape for the day on 7.5, reel-to-reel,
Yeah.
And, so they liked the song at Mel's company, and we wrote another one soon after, like a couple of weeks later, maybe, And
Yeah.
I found myself at the Bluebird bar, sitting there beside this guy in the middle of the night, and we strike up a conversation, and he says, that's my dad up on the wall over here. And I look up, it's Roger Miller. Well, it's Dean Miller's, was who it was. I was sitting with Dean Miller, and he said, "What do you do?" I said, "Well, I don't know, man. I guess maybe I'm a songwriter." I didn't even know, and it's like, so we kind of pal around and hit it off, and we end up sitting on my tailgate on 16th Avenue in front of Belmont College. I had a little apartment there at 1624
Oh
16th
wow.
Avenue. And we sat out there in the middle of the night with no one around on like a Sunday night, no traffic or anything, with our guitars and wrote our first song together. And me and Dean wrote about 40 or 50 songs together on a run there, just so we learned to write really with each other. Roger
Wow.
Miller's son, and
Oh my
uh,
goodness.
so Dean, he's still making records and writing songs, but we
Yeah.
kind of learned how to co-write with each other, really.
Well, I was gonna tell you that you got a song on an album called Drank. Of course, you know
Oh yeah.
this, but it man, you've got some Roger Miller going on when you're singing that song. I love it. I don't know if you
Oh
did that
man.
on purpose or whatever. Maybe that's just what I'm hearing, but it's great. I hear some of that coming out on that. But so
Well,
you
thank
wrote
you,
with his
man.
son there for a while. That's awesome.
Yeah. That Drink song I wrote with my buddy Billy Burnett, who played in Roger's band years ago. But uh, actually, one time I was on the road in Trisha Yearwood's band. I helped her put her first band together, and we were out there on the road and up in Canada, in Calgary, and I called Dean and said, "Hey, man, I'm up here in Canada." And he said, "Well, call Dad. He's across town, and he's got the night off." And so I called Roger Miller, and he brought his wife Mary and their two little adopted kids in there, and we watched Garth Brooks' show that night together in Calgary, Canada. And I was telling Roger, I'm leaving the band after this tour, and he said, "Well, why don't you come out and go on the road with me and join my band?" And I said, "You got a deal. You're on." And then
Wow.
Roger got sick with cancer and never went out, never took a band out again, and passed away soon after that.
Man.
But I almost got to work with Roger. He was a great guy, and we kind of hit it off.
Yeah, man. I remember stumbling upon them little 45s in my grandparents' bin, and there were those red Columbia, little green apples, and God Almighty, he had so many good songs. It's such a character in the way he sang
He
them.
sure did. And great producer too. Jerry Kennedy was such a great producer, and he did all Tom T. Hall's records and Roger Miller's and so many great records.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Harper Valley PTA for one thing too. He cut.
Oh wow, I didn't
Oh,
realize.
Jeannie C. Yeah, Jeannie C. Riley.
Yeah, well that makes sense. So you're writing, and you're still. It sounded like you're, kind of chronologically here. You're writing, and you're developing a catalog. How'd you go on to do that album? And you even had some charting singles there.
A little bit. It's a very political business, as everyone can see, and I'm not much of a politician, but um, uh, my publisher, my first publisher, was a great guy named Pat Higdon, and he ran a company called Patrick Joseph Music, and so I was signed there. And the first song that I ever had published was a song I wrote with my buddy Will Smith, and Will and I wrote a song called "Fallen Never Felt So Good," which
Mm-hmm.
that was the first cut we got, and actually I signed the publishing deal on that song. I mean, I did a single song deal with Patrick Joseph Music for that one song. Pat Higdon said, I think I can get that cut if you want to give me some publishing. And I said, okay, man,
Yeah.
and he got it cut on a kid named Dude Mallory that Jimmy Bowen produced on Capitol Records. And so I got to have a writing room and an office and a place to go to every day and drink coffee with like-minded people,
Yeah.
and that was really a great learning experience. And Pat kind of nurtured me and set up a showcase for me to play for Warner Brothers Records, and that's how I got on Warner Brothers. So
Gotcha.
I don't know what they were thinking. They signed me for a little while, and I did a couple of records, but it didn't really pan out.
Well, it sounds like they probably got to thinking too much instead of just letting you do.
Well, I'd like to think that. I don't know. I was pretty green. I didn't have a lot of great songs. At the time, I might have had, 40 or 50 songs I felt like were good enough to record, and
Yeah.
now I've lived a lot more, and I've got a lot more songs. So I've been building up my ammunition for that, But
Yeah.
I don't know. I've got a lot of records I want to do. I don't know if I'll ever get to do them.
Well, I know I have the 1994 album. It's titled that for those
Right.
who might be listening. But it eventually was released. What I got is 2010, correct?
Sounds right. Yes,
Yeah, come out about 15, 16 years later. And one thing I noticed, the difference between that first record and then that one, I heard a lot of dobro and I heard some banjo. And I'm listening to that going, man, it's almost like this record was 10 years before its time, because I think of in the early 2000s, early mid 2000s, you had like Dierks Bentley out with what was I thinking with that dobro.
Yeah.
Little Big Town kind of had their thing with Boondocks, and I just remember the dobro was real hot on those records, and I listened to your '94 album, and man, it sounds like it almost belongs in that era with still got the throwback sound. But
Wow.
I just thought
I've
that
never
was
heard
interesting.
anybody say that. That's interesting. And well, my first album I cut with Mark Wright as my producer, and Mark, he said, "Well, who do you want on the record?" And so I said, "Well, first guy I wanted was James Burton, Elvis's guitar player.
Oh
So,
yeah,
and Roy Husky Jr. was my favorite upright bass player living, at
yeah,
the time, and so that's how we ended up making "Falling Never Felt So Good" in that whole first record. But then Mark, he started running Decca Records, and Decca wouldn't allow him to cut outside projects on it due to his contract. So then I looked around and I got a hold of Emery Gordy Jr. and I love his production, and he's a great musician and great guy, and it's Patty Loveless's husband, So
oh, okay,
and so Emery knew all of these great guys. He had produced Bill Monroe and Bluegrass Boys, and he had Patty, and he played with the Hot Band. He played with Elvis. He was the guy on Burning Love playing the bass.
Oh,
Emery
okay.
Gordy Jr.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah.
And so Emery and I made that second album, which was 1994, and I had all my heroes on there, my fiddle heroes. Bobby Hicks on fiddle, and Bill Monroe came with the Bluegrass Boys, and we sang a quartet on a new song that I wrote with my buddy John Scott Sherrill, called "Worn Through Stone."
Yeah.
And that was one of his last sessions. Monroe actually was in a wheelchair when he sang that quartet piece with us in the studio.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Patty Loveless sang harmony on a couple of things, and I got Jerry Douglas, and I didn't really know Jerry at the time,
Yeah.
He came in and played on a song I wrote with Tim Menzie called "The Grandpa That I Know."
Mm-hmm.
And so it had a lot of roots to it, a lot of acoustic stuff. Well, the head of the label at Warner Brothers, after I turned in the project to him, he calls me into his office and says, "I don't hear any singles on here. This doesn't sound like the current John Michael Montgomery record that's out."
Oh my gosh.
I said, "I know it don't. That's the point. It's what it is." And he said, "Well, whatever you decide to do, we're behind you 100%. And I said, "Okay."
Huh.
So I thought about it, and I called him up and said, I love it, and I just want to keep it like it is. If we can, just move forward and see what happens, And he said, "Great." And nothing happened, and I had to basically ask off the label because I sat there for 9 months without a single, and at the time I thought Mark Wright was going to pick me up at Decca because he told me he would, and he didn't. So then I just ended up going to the woods and writing songs after that,
Well,
that blew the record deal off,
Well, that's where you said you went to the woods and started writing songs. That turned out pretty good too.
Yeah, it did all right.
I was looking at, mid late '90s. I mean, you got two Pina Coladas. Could you tell a story on that one when
Sure.
you wrote it?
Well, I had started writing for a company named Forerunner Music, which is the old Jack's Track studio. Jack Clement had built it in the '60s.
Yeah.
And Alan Reynolds was a partner at the publishing company, and Mark Miller and Terrell Ty and Jim Rooney. And so those four were the owners of Forerunner Music. And I was writing over there, and I had a little writing session with Sandy Mason and Bonita Hill. And we weren't coming up with anything, and I walked out on the porch and was sitting out on the edge of the porch, and they walked out there with me, and I said, girls, we ought to just forget this songwriting and go to Florida. And Sandy said, well, if I go to Florida, I want a pina colada. And Bonita said, well, I want one for each hand. And so I just picked up the guitar and sang the chorus, the kind of the structure of the chorus, the first line, bring me two pina coladas. And we had a couple of different lines in there than what Garth ended up using, but it fell out pretty quick, and I put it down on a little 4-track recorder that Sandy had, and she played it for Alan Reynolds, and Alan asked to hear it 5 or 6 times in a row, and he said, I'm going to take that to Garth. And Garth just happened to be cutting within a week, and we recorded that, and Garth had me come in and play the guitar. I played the acoustic on that record, and nice. And we all got in a big gang sang, or whatever you want to call it, and sang along with him on that, and it came out all right.
Yeah, I'd say so. Those guitar licks, man, that's pretty signature on that thing. I was gonna ask you if that was you, because it sounds like you.
It is, yeah. And I remember I was trying to make it right, because I overdubbed that guitar part. They cut it with a band, and then he said he wanted me to come in and play the guitar on it. So they already had the track started when I played that part, and I remember Garth sticking his head in the door and saying, now don't get it too perfect, man. Don't work on it too much. Just let it be,
Yeah.
And so the next run through I did, they just kept it. So
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great, man. Well, you've been a part of a lot of different really great songs that, obviously you got the big ones, the hits, and the Josh Turner, you got the Blake Shelton. Aside from the well-known cuts you've had, do you have any lesser-known cuts that hold a lot of meaning to you, that somebody cut that maybe ain't the first one people think of when they think of Shawn Camp?
I don't know. I've just been lucky to have cuts on a lot of my heroes' records. Most of my favorite things, in a way, were things that Guy Clark cut that we wrote together, and he was really a great mentor, teacher as far as songwriting goes, and a great friend. But so anything he cut that we wrote was a good thing for me, and I don't know. There's so many that I don't know, man.
You did a Guy Clark tribute record, didn't you?
Yeah, I co-produced a tribute record on him called This One's for Him. We had 34 artists on it, and we cut a bunch, 30 songs or something of guys, and it was a great thing to, we had Lyle Lovett on it, Willie Nelson, and I can't even remember everybody. It was a major cattle call of all of the greats, especially the great Texas artists that had any association with Guy Clark.
Right.
They were kind of involved on it. We had Jerry Jeff Walker and I don't even know, Christopherson, of course. And
as you say those names, it's just sad, losing people. And then we got Christopherson here, just retired recently.
I actually got to produce maybe his last studio production, one called the Cedar Creek Sessions.
Really?
We cut that down in Austin, and I was a producer on that. So I got to produce Christopherson on one of his albums. That was really a highlight,
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Well, you've been a part of some cool stuff. There's the project called the Bluegrass Elvises. How did that happen?
Oh man, that's a lot of fun. me and Billy Burnett just decided to put that together. Dave Ferguson was a friend of ours, and Fergie wanted to do it, and the three of us got together and did the Bluegrass Elvises. It's just
y'all just
me and Billy.
That's a
me
great
and Billy
idea.
just took turns singing Elvis songs with some of the greatest bluegrass musicians in the world, and it was just fun. We had a lot of laughs for a couple of days. I'm a huge fan of Elvis, and this was in no way meant to disrespect him, but it was just fun, to play with that caliber of a bluegrass acoustic musician and playing those old rockabilly songs with that band. And it's amazing how they really fit well with that instrumentation, so it was
They
fun.
do, yeah, especially those old ones, those Sun records and stuff.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's amazing how much Bill Monroe influenced that whole Sun era,
I think Bill actually influenced Chuck Berry more than anybody realizes too.
Yes.
It's a whole style of guitar playing sounded like Bill's mandolin playing.
Yeah, the pickup notes. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing.
And but I listened to that Sun records. My mom and dad, they had all of the Sun records, and I grew up 2 hours west of Memphis in Arkansas, and it's crazy, man, because when I was 5 years old, I was playing those Sun records and thinking those are antiques, man. They're ancient records.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, that would have been like 1970. So they were only, like 20 years old. And 20 years goes by pretty quick, let me just tell you.
Yeah.
So it's shocking to me to think back on that and think how recent those records were when I was a kid, and how ancient they felt like they were at the time.
Wow. Well, I mean, you've got a way of blending in, kind of like a chameleon, with all these different bands and groups that you've been a part of, projects. Earls of Leicester, of course, is one that Grammy award-winning, bluegrass take on Flat and Scruggs. I love what y'all been doing with that, and was that Jerry Douglas's idea or who started that band?
Well, Johnny Warren is Paul Warren's son. Johnny's daddy played with Flat and Scruggs from 54 to 69, and he played all the fiddle parts. And so Johnny's still playing his daddy's fiddle, the same one that he played on those records. Johnny and Charlie Cushman grew up together. And Charlie is about as close to Earl Scruggs banjo playing as anyone ever has been. And so the two of them had been making records together for years, just Charlie and Johnny making banjo fiddle records. And they called Jerry Douglas to come play on their record.
Okay.
And Jerry and the three of them decided, man, wouldn't it be cool if we could actually put together a Flat and Scruggs type band and play all their songs? And so the three of them brought it up, brainstormed on it. And Jerry called me one night out of the blue and said, hey, this is Jerry Douglas. I don't hear from Jerry Douglas very rarely. It's like, man, all right. Hey, how you doing? He said, no, I'm putting a Flat and Scruggs band together with Charlie Cushman and Johnny Warren and Tim O'Brien at the time. Tim was coming in. And we're wondering if you might want to be Lester. And I said, why, hell yes.
Nice.
And so I went over there. We had a little rehearsal. And I walked in wearing the suit and the tie.
Oh, man.
Into the rehearsal. And we played 8 bars of, can't remember what the song was. We kicked off into this song. And I had to stop the band about 8 bars into it because it was so identical. It sounded like I was standing in the middle of a Flat and Scruggs record before I ever opened my mouth. Those guys were that close. So, we had a lot of fun playing that stuff. We played for about 6 years or so, and the last show we've done was September of 2019, and we were kind of going to take a small hiatus this year anyway, or last year, and it just all, with the pandemic, it just kind of played out. like it was supposed to for us, I think.
Yeah.
So we wanted to feel that music in a live setting and feel
Yeah.
the crowd's response to that music. And that, I mean, there's no way for me to describe the feeling of that music being just like it was on the Flat and Scruggs record. As far as the solo is as close to identical in the same place of the, placement, the fiddles on the first solo and the banjos here.
Mm-hmm.
We did it like the same order in every way. And I didn't sound exactly like Lester on it, but I did kind of always scoop my notes like Lester did.
Yeah.
Because you have to do that with those songs in order for the tension to be there. I mean, that's what that was, and so it was a real, it was a great thing to walk in Lester's shoes a little bit, for
Absolutely.
a little while.
Yeah, I saw y'all at the Ryman with that, and man, it was honestly like I was just in a time capsule. Or in a time machine. That's what I meant to say, time machine.
Well, that's good to hear. That's what I'm shooting for, that's what we're all shooting for. And in my mind, I wanted to write it into a Broadway type play and do a thing where there's an act goes around it, and do it that way. And it just never evolved into that for everybody. But I wanted to do that, and I don't know. Maybe we still can someday. I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird times. I mean, we have to.
Yeah.
Kind of seems like everything's on hold right now, but with all the musical outlets that you've been a part of and created for yourself, how are you holding up in this pandemic where just ain't nothing going on?
I've loved it, man. I've loved this year.
Really?
I know I've lost some great friends, and there's been a lot of sickness and bad times here, but it's been such a blessing to stay home. The first time since I was like 16 years old, really, and and not have a show that I had to do every 3-4 days or be on the road. I've been home. I've been working with my mom and dad, my dad out at the farm, and almost every day I'm with my folks. So that's been a real blessing.
Oh, man, that's great.
And I've been able to write a lot of songs by myself, and I've enjoyed it. I mean, I miss playing to my friends, fans out there, or whoever. I love the feeling of playing live music, and you feed off of that audience, response. There's nothing like it. But in another way, maybe everybody's going to appreciate it more when it does happen.
I believe so. I remember, I guess it's about 8-9 years ago, I was heading back through the Blue Ridge, and the Blue Ridge Mountains there on I-40, and I was going back to my grandpa's funeral.
Oh, man.
And I remember riding along there in my truck, and I had just got to where I was downloading songs on my phone, and all of a sudden your Grandpa That I Know came on there, and man, that was obviously the timing was amazing. It was just on the playlist. It just popped on there, and I remember just pulling over there and thinking, man, this is very, very special song from your grandpa, right? Is that what that's
right?
That's a personal song from your life.
Yeah, it is. My granddaddy, my daddy's daddy, he was sick in the VA hospital in Little Rock, and I remember it was Christmas Day, and he was in intensive care with from smoking cigarettes, and laying there. I'd never seen him without a shave, close shave. He always tried to stay neat, and he wasn't able to do that. I remember shaving him that day, and just I had to leave. I had to come back to Nashville for some reason, and had to leave him in that hospital. And so on the way home, I wrote a couple of those verses, and within a week, I guess it was, I ended up at in a co-writing session with the great Tim Menzie. Man, he's one of the best there ever was, and Tim's one of the greatest singers, greatest songwriters, and he does all gospel now. But at the time, he had a country career on Columbia Records, I think it was.
Okay.
Or CBS, whatever they were calling it. And anyway, I played him that little piece of a song. I said, man, I don't know if this could be a song or not. And so I played it for him, and he started telling me about his granddaddy. And the two of our granddads were real similar. And he was from Mechanicsville, Virginia, is where Tim was from.
All right.
But both of our granddaddies wore overalls their entire lives, you know, and but his had already passed away. So we kind of merged the two granddaddies in our story of that song, and I'm really proud of it. That song never lets me down, you know. And actually, my granddaddy got better, and I ended up playing that song on the Ralph Emery show on TNN, and he saw me sing it in his little TV back in Arkansas. And he said, Shawn wrote that song for me. And so when he passed away a couple of years later, we found a clean new pair of starched overalls and a starched white dress shirt, and that's what he wanted to be buried in. So that's what we buried him in instead of a pinstripe suit like the song says.
Yeah.
But so that, yeah, it always hits me. I was really close to him.
Yeah. You know? Well, you can tell. I mean, you've got the old soul comes out in your music for sure. In a very fresh, relevant way too.
Well, all the old guys, the old ones are the ones that really carry the knowledge around with them, you know. So that's what I always wanted to gravitate towards, you know, the old guys, the old men,
right,
fiddling, and I just always have felt like they deserved respect, and you know, and they always had so much great stuff to share with you, you know. So that's why I always ended up with them.
Right. Well, I mean, you've sure carried that torch. I'll tell you that. And
well, thank you.
You know, this pandemic where live music halted has been one of those things where I told that story to kind of point out that, you know, even if you're working with your folks down, you know, on the farm down there, and you're not out there doing shows right now, but your music's still working. You know what I mean? Your songs are still getting played by folks, and you know, music is still uplifting people where they're at. I know that I can say that happens to me a lot. I still hear music that is it's just the right song at the right time. You know, and your music has been a big part of that for me as well. And I just wanted to mention that no matter what's going on, and how the fact that you're not even out there to play, you're still having a big impact with the music you've created. And I think that's pretty cool.
Well, that's awful kind of you, man. You know, I don't think about that much, but you may have a point, you know. That makes me feel a little bit better about the whole thing.
Well, I appreciate you coming on here. And before I run off, I wanted to ask you too, Lauren Massetti's album is just, talk about another fantastic record and very timeless.
That band on that record's been my band for, I don't know, 10 or 15 years. And, and she came into my life, and we ended up writing a lot of songs and became a couple, and so I started incorporating her in my shows, you know, letting her come up and sing, and man, she's such a great singer and a great writer. She's one of the best songwriters and singers I believe I've ever met. You know, she's one of the greatest, and she's young, and but so she's got a lot of great music to share ahead of her.
Absolutely.
So we had a great time making the record, and she's done well. We're just gearing up for the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, your band, they didn't disappoint on it. They played hot on it. I saw her playing at the Sutler with those guys, and man, it was like a lot like when I saw you at Bluebird that time. It was like, hey, that's the same sound. That's your band up there. They were great.
Yeah, I was out of town. She took my band, stole my band from me.
I saw that. Yeah.
That's good though. I didn't do my. I mean, it was. I didn't. They didn't miss me much on that gig, I don't think. But it was good. I'm glad she's getting out doing that.
Man, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to let me talk to you and just kind of share your story with us out here.
Well, yes, sir. I'm glad to do it, and I do want to mention one more thing. I just Friday we released a new video on a song that I put the music and melody to, a poem of Johnny Cash's.
Oh,
and,
that's right. Okay.
Just last night we passed 1 million views on Facebook, so there's a lot of folks checking it out, and if you get a chance, check it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's called "I'm Coming, Honey." That's the title of it.
Oh man.
It's a poem that he wrote in 1958 on a Delta Airlines stationery that they found, and I just kind of tried to channel Johnny Cash in the way he may have meant it musically to be,
Right.
And, so that's what we did. We recorded that.
Did y'all do that out there? Did y'all do that at the Cash Cabin out there?
We did, and John Carter helped out with it, and
right.
He actually directed this video on me, and Johnny Cash's grandson helped run the lights and the cameras and stuff,
Right.
So, but it was really cool.
Yeah.
It's on a project called Forever Words, and you can get the deluxe edition, and it's on there if you wanted to buy that album.
Absolutely. Well, I've been hearing about it. I got to check out this video though. Somehow that one's not jumped on my radar.
It came out Friday, so it's only been out 5 days now.
Yeah.
It's got
Okay.
over 1 million views, so that's better than I've done in a long time on any video.
Well, it's about to have another. That's for sure. I'm about to look that one up. So that is awesome, man. Well, anything, moving forward, you got anything you're looking forward to this year? You think you're going to get out there you got anything on the road?
The first show I've got that that's tentatively booked is September at the Earl Scruggs Festival in Shelby, North Carolina.
Okay, yeah.
With the Earls of Leicester, and we're going to try to be there for that. I don't know if it's all going to pan out, but we're shooting for it anyway.
Well, it's about all you can do, but I hope everything can work itself out, and people can do this stuff and feel safe and be safe at the same time.
Me too, brother.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for visiting with me, and hey, don't be a stranger.
Yeah.
Let's catch up anytime.
Well,
never know, we may write a song one of these days together.
I hear you, man. I'd love to. Anytime. Right. Thank you, Shawn. Hey, have a great night, man.
All right, take care, Adam.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.